Hello, Diesel Dads. This is Aaron Waddell, and I got with me today a special guest. His name is Paul Bright. He's a sleep coach and a military veteran, and I'm so excited to have him on the podcast. Paul, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I'm doing great. Maybe because I got a good night's sleep, but that's all relative.
That's great to hear, man. Sleep's so important. So important. I'd struggle with that myself sometimes, so I'd love to. Can't wait to hear your insights, and so let's get to it.
Okay.
So, Paul, I like to kind of start at the beginning with people. So tell me about your upbringing. What was it like growing up for you?
Well, I am what we call a military brat, where we're dependents. Military brats tend to be dependents of parents that were in the military or lived overseas. So I grew up in part of my childhood was in the Philippines, and the other part was in the States, like various places. We're always moving every 4 years, 2 years to Arkansas and California and all that. But then about 87 or so, we settled in North Carolina, in the middle of North Carolina. So I spent all my junior high and high school and my undergrad in North Carolina.
That's good.
Middle of the state. And then I was like, you know what? I kind of want to join the military and go see the world before I figure out what else I want to do. So I joined, and I put all these like overseas places, I wanted to go to as an Air Force member, and ended up in South Carolina. So I spent 8 years in South Carolina, stationed in Charleston, but I was able to travel the world anyway because of my job. I fixed jet engines for C-17s, giant cargo plane. So I got to go do a lot of that.
I was going to say, was your father in the Air Force, or?
Yeah, he was in the Air Force too.
Okay.
And so was his stepfather. So
it's a whole family.
Yeah, it was a whole family thing. And
I
didn't even have plans to do it.
Did they fight in the war or anything, or were in like Vietnam, or?
Yeah. My dad was in Vietnam. I want to say my stepfather was involved in the Korean War, but yeah, my dad was definitely in Vietnam in the Air Force, working on cargo planes and other things that you do in Vietnam. So yeah, definitely part of that, and was in through the start of the first Gulf War, and got out shortly after that.
Oh, great. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, you're saying you moved to South Carolina?
Yeah, I was stationed at Charleston Air Force Base for 8 years. Yeah, it was great.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
great. And so how was your experience in the Air Force?
It was great. It was great, except for the sleep things. I ended up at Travis for a couple of years in California, and I was there. I got out at Travis Air Force Base in the military because I wanted to go do grad school and all that, and for mental health. And you can't really get all your training hours and intern hours while you're in the military. So at the 10-year mark, I was like, I can separate. And we stayed in we stayed in California for a good 16 and a half years, and just moved back to North Carolina. Just moved back, not even a year ago. So
you said you were going to grad school for mental health?
That's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
What interested you in that?
Oh, well, it actually started before I got into the Air Force. I had worked at summer camps with kids and everything, and I was like, man, this is really cool. I was going to undergrad for psychology. But then while I was in the Air Force, interestingly enough, I started having a few of my own bouts of depression and anxiety, and a lot of it was contributing to that was my sleep issues. But then as I was taught to manage my stress a little better and align myself a little bit better while I served, I was like, you know what, this would be good. I want to continue this education. So when I ended up getting stationed at Travis Air Force Base, we were standing up a unit, which is basically we were getting something started. So we didn't have planes attached to us. So we actually had some time at night to go to school or do anything extracurricular. So I started up grad school, and halfway through my first semester, I was like, yeah, it's time. I need to make a big shift in my life. And so that's what led to it.
Interesting. I was going to ask you, because it's going back to the depression you suffered.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the military myself, I know there's a big stigma around that, and I just wonder how was that experience in the Air Force? Was it something that you tried to conceal? Did
really good question.
Was it accepted? Did they get you help?
Yeah, I actually got some help. It was a combination of things that were happening, and it was interesting because one of the quote unquote failures that I had led me to what I'm doing today because I got help, because I was in and I said, you know what, this special duty I was doing, it's not working out for me. I'm finding myself like having panic attacks at night. I'm finding this is happening. And yeah, there is a huge stigma, and it still exists, but not as bad as it did, about, reporting mental health issues. But what I was dealing with was not untreatable at the surface. It wasn't, a significant major diagnosis or anything like that. It was just a matter of managing anxiety and managing all the things that were leading to it. So I did get help, and it was the best thing to happen to me. I didn't get kicked out or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was just moved back to where I was working, which ended up leading me to California, and that ended up making me even more interested in grad school and pursuing that as a career. So it was great. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us about your sleep problems that you did experience during that time.
So I got in my first duty station, like I said, was at Charleston. It was 1998, the beginning of 98 by the time I got there, after you do all the basic training and the technical schools. And I want to say it was by 1999, the Kosovo Air and Space Campaign had kicked off, where we were supporting NATO with, handling that whole Bosnia, Herzegovina area, Albania, all the conflict that was happening there. So part of that was working on cargo planes. We were taking, supplies in and out of there. And we started, we were majorly staging out of Germany. But on the way there were a lot of stops with a lot of different time zones and a lot of you're not sure where you're going to sleep or anything like that. And so I went from country to country every couple of weeks, and then we finally landed in Germany, and finally, I think it was 2 attempts to find places to legit sleep, because the Army was taking up all these spots. And we ended up mixing services in some places. And so, and I was working day shift sometimes from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then the next time it was night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Random days off, because that's what you do. You just do what you need to do in times of conflict like that. Well, all that led to my very first sleep paralysis episode, and I had no idea what was happening. I just remember thinking that I was awake, but I was paralyzed. And I was in my hotel bed, and I had just gotten off work and gotten to bed at 9 in the morning. And I think it was 1 o'clock or so when it was happening. I was like, am I awake or am I not awake? My body was completely frozen, and I didn't know what was happening on the outside of it. So I just remember just trying to fight and couldn't breathe or anything like that. And I was like, whatever you do, you got to get up before anybody sees this happening, whatever's happening. And I did end up finally waking myself up, but I was super scared, and I kept falling back asleep and happening again and waking up and all that stuff. And then finally I just gave up on it. And my roommates, they never saw anything that was happening. And I literally did not know what was happening on the outside of my body. I just knew inside I felt like I was being buried alive.
Wow.
And so,
can I reverse just a second? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I was just talking to this about my group, the Wellness Society University. There on Discord, we have a group, and that the idea of sleep paralysis came up. Just said, have you ever? It was actually a question Discord asked. Said they had a bot that asked the question. Said, have you ever been able to move when you woke up?
Right.
And people were like, is that a thing? People that aren't even aware of it. That people suffer like that. And I was saying, I actually have a friend, Paul, that had this problem for a long time, and it's kind of was eye-opening to me that people aren't even aware that it's a thing. So go ahead.
And statistically, I want to say probably a lot of, maybe 5% of the world has probably had at least one experience of it. They just didn't know what it was.
5? Wow.
Maybe.
Really? I had no idea it was that high.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's dependent on the degrees of how it's, but, again, most people don't even know what's happening. They just know something happened like that. But even in some of the social media groups I'm in, it's you just type in the word and you add in, and there's 2,000, 3,000 people that are members that are going to speak on their experiences. But this was happening to me, I want to say almost weekly while I was in the military, and I didn't tell anybody.
Is it more common in the military?
I don't know for sure if it is or it isn't. It definitely was for me. I do remember when I did eventually speak about it, people were telling me, "Oh, bro, I've been through that." So
our sleep schedules were so horrible, and just going through basic training in the AIT, what I did in the Army.
Yeah.
I was only in the reserve, so I wasn't, for years. But just in that period of time, our sleep schedules are so disrupted and so awful. It seems like it would be a common thing to get disturbances.
This sleep disorders and disruptions are very common in the military and post-military. But as far as sleep paralysis goes, I don't know how many people would report it. I sure didn't talk about it for probably 2 years. Not even my wife knew, because when I was at home station, I either worked from either 3 p.m. to 12 a.m., or I was working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and we were on 12-hour shifts. So when I was going to bed, she was up on the other side of the house with the kids. So she didn't see my episodes until I ended up going on day shift eventually. Eventually, I did tell, a doctor. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I was scared. I was scared they're going to boot me out. They're going to give me what they call, a medical discharge. Thank you for your service. It was honorable, but you can't stay in. I did not know what it was, but I was so scared, I would stay up all night, I'd have anxiety about it happening again. And again, about once a week it was happening at that point. And I eventually told my doctor, and she was like, really don't have much information on this other than it could be related to sleep apnea. So make sure you don't sleep on your back, sleep on your side if you can. And if you can go to day shift, see if you can get on day shift. And I was like, nobody in the military gets to tell their bosses, I need to be on day shift, because of this or that. And they'll be like, what's wrong with you? So, but I did get lucky. And I want to say about a few weeks afterwards, they were realigning people's shifts anyway. So I did get on day shift, and it did start to subside, but it didn't go away completely. It was still happening every couple of weeks. And that is when my wife started noticing it more, because she'd hear me in the middle of the night doing whatever it was I was doing, trying to get myself out of it, or why can't you go to bed? I was like, because,
How many years had you been married at that point?
Oh, man. Well, we were probably married maybe 3 or 4 years at that point. So
3 or 4 years, and she had no idea until
I started telling her what was happening. Yeah. But that is what was leading to, that was one of the big disorders I was dealing with.
Cool. So what happened from that point on?
Well, as I was getting on day shift, I started trying to do my own research. Now, again, this is the early 2000s, so it's not like the internet's everywhere and all this information is there. I mean, the internet was there, Google was around, but it was I just kind of want to figure out what I need to do. And so slowly but surely, I was starting to figure out bits and pieces to this mystery of how do I go to bed and stay asleep, But it's just harder in the military, because even if you're not working in the flight line or you're deployed or anything like that, you have all these exercises. You have all these moments. You still have a responsibility to, when you're called to be awake, to go somewhere or do something, you have to be ready as soon as you can. That's when you're talking about basic training. Physically, that was the best sleep I ever had, because you're so exhausted by the time it's lights out. But it's not like there's a gentle wake up in the morning hey, buddy, time to get up and get ready for your day. Let the sunlight hit your eyes. That's not how we were woken up then. So after a few nights of that, it's sort of is this the night they're going to wake us up at 4? Is this the night they're going to wake us up at 2? Or are they going to come in with bangings? But that is to prepare you for military life, because when you're serving, you have to be ready almost at all times. So I was still sleeping on the edge of if I have to get up, can I get up and be ready in 20 minutes, no matter what it is? So the sleep paralysis didn't happen as often, but the ramifications of it, the sleep anxiety, sometimes the panic attacks of not wanting to go to bed, those things were still happening. But as I was starting to get into more research, and then when I told you I got stationed at Travis and I was going to grad school, now I started having access to these journals, these peer-reviewed journals, and I can really see some studies and really dig into even the basics of Google Scholar of what this is that I was going through and all these things. And so that's when I started trying to do things a little more regulated as best as I could. like trying to go to bed at the right time at the same time. And at the same time, I was going to grad school at night, so it wasn't like I was coming home, I wasn't on the flight line or anything like that anymore. I was a civilian at that point, but I was still working late hours. I was still staying up. I was still doing work up until the point I needed to sleep. I was studying. I was doing counseling for veterans. It was still a lot. So, but as this was going on, I was building my own personal knowledge base. Like, oh, this helps. Oh, that's going to help. So I started to eventually get better sleep. And eventually, I finally, I want to say it was 2016, I went and got an actual sleep study to figure out, okay, is there something happening inside me physically besides mentally with the sleep paralysis that's happening? Because it takes a long time sometimes for veterans to get this type of help. It was a good, even when I asked for a sleep study, it was a good 6 months before I got in to get it done.
And that's while you're still in the...
I was out of the
Air
military
Force?
at that point. So I got out in 2008, and I was...
2008, okay.
I was doing grad school in California, and I was a federal civilian. I was, working on base processing clearances for people, and then getting off work at 5 and then going to grad school like 3 nights a week from like 6 to 9 or 10. And then sometimes I'd have to drive a couple hours to get to a class. So it was a little crazy schedule then. But I was able to get this sleep study in, and they noticed that I did have a little bit of sleep apnea, and that did unlock some things, because one of the things that happens that I learned along the way is that when your brain stops breathing, or when your body stops breathing, your brain can sometimes wake up like, oh crap, we're going to die. So it wakes up and it's trying to figure out what's going on. Well, if that happens at certain stages of your sleep, your body is catatonic, yet your brain is awake trying to see what's going on. So it's almost like an alert. And that led to some other solutions. It did, because...
I was going to say, have you read the book Breathe by James Nestor?
No, I've not.
Oh, have you not? Okay, because he talks about the sleep apnea and how proper breathing is like a big key in how... how sleep, if that manifests, in your sleep.
It sure can.
And reducing sleep apnea.
It sure can.
But
there's things you can do in
curious.
your room to help with that without you even really trying to help with that. But yeah, even repositioning, all kinds of stuff can happen.
So you said you did that sleep study in 2016, and so you got some good benefit out of that. It
was really good.
And then, did you, after you went through that, was that when you start thinking about becoming a coach, or you thought about it before?
No, I actually hadn't. I didn't even know that a sleep coach thing was a thing. I always thought like you just had to go to the doctor, they'd give you a medication that'd help you go to sleep. I was like, okay. And they didn't give me that, so I didn't know what was happening. One of the funny stories that happened was when he's like, "Do you snore at night?" I was like, "I don't know. I really don't know. Let me ask my wife. She would know." And I said, "Babe, do I snore at night?" She goes, "Oh yeah, you snore a lot." I was like, "I do?" She said, "Yeah, I just kind of rub you with the elbow and you turn over and then you stop snoring." I was like, "Oh." And some of the snoring was happening because in California my allergies were horrible, and so when I started treating, because they gave me the CPAP machine and I hated it. They put the little mask on that. It did help because it did open up my airways, which got more oxygen into me, so that reduces the sleep apnea. But I was like, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's probably more my allergies. And so when I started legitimately treating my allergies, that reduced some of the stopping breathing at night. And so now the sleep paralysis wasn't happening but maybe once a month at that point, as long as I was doing all the other things I was supposed to be doing, because I was slowly getting out of grad school at that point. So there was no more driving, going to work to 5 and then driving to 9. So I was just about done with that. So, this gives me more time at home to actually treat the things I need to treat. So the sleep coach thing actually didn't come up until, I want to say, last year. Was like, oh, there's a thing for this.
Okay.
It's like, I felt like, how like when you make a life adjustment and you stick to it, like whether it's a diet or whatever, it's like, and you just, you're doing all these things and they're helping, you're not quite sure why. And it's like, that'd be cool if I could get certified in that. And so I started looking, I was like, oh, there's a certification for this? I was like, this is really cool because, because again, it was beneficial for me to have access to actual sleep research. I even have a friend that's a sleep psychologist, so I could bounce questions off of her. And then with me getting a degree in counseling and marriage and family therapy and all that, I knew already the benefits of getting good sleep and some of the why. I just didn't know all the exact pieces. So becoming a sleep coach gave me more access to the why. And so as I was getting certified in that, I could pull out my own resources and grad school stuff. And then it was like, if I'd known all this stuff 10 years ago, that this is the why behind what's happening to me, I probably would have been good to go within a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I had that same kind of thing. Like, I don't know, with me, it was like, I thought about becoming a coach, but I was like, I didn't see any possible way that I could, earn a living doing that. And, and it took me a long time to realize, like, oh, people actually do coach and they actually can do it full time and, help people and everything else.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a shift in the way you think to come to that realization.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And so now you're coaching, what do you like most about coaching?
Hold on for a second. I like that I can help people find their own strengths and build off of those to improve their lives, especially with sleep, because the hard thing about getting the good sleep, it's not, you can't see it happening. You just have to wake up and know that it's happened. And like everything else, sometimes it's a 1% change, it's a 10% change, and then if you're trying to lose weight or lose fat, you can measure yourself once a week and know, oh yeah, or you can tell from your pants, oh yeah, these are getting smaller or whatever, and the thing that works for you. With getting good sleep, everyone knows they need more sleep, but they find it hard. It's not so much the physical piece of doing the things, it's the mentality of like, what am I missing? What am I not able to do? What is happening here that's keeping me from getting the good sleep or actually even wanting to sleep at the times that I need to? And so I like helping turn that light bulb on for people because it's different for everybody in the mental space. There's physical things that are supposed to happen to help you get good sleep, but the mental space, it's harder for people. And I like seeing that light bulb come on. Ironically, it's counterintuitive. You don't want a light on while you're sleeping, but I like seeing that figurative light on come on with folks and having them tell me months later, oh my gosh, this is what's happening because I'm getting good sleep now. So I love that part. Yeah,
that's great.
I love that part of it.
That's great. I was thinking about that. I think like the hardest part for me is with getting good sleep is letting go of the things I feel I need to do. And I wonder if that's a common thing
Absolutely.
with people.
It is. And likely, and ironically, the folks that I work with the most right now, are coaches. They're fellow coaches. They're other leaders and all that. And we tend to be very busy and wanting to do things to be productive. And the creative heads like me, like, it's not uncommon to be like, oh my gosh, what an idea. I need to write that down, And so there tends to be that feeling that you're not missing out on something, but you're missing out on an opportunity. And so what I tend to find is I have to help people realize that you can't see sleep as an interruption, but as a need. So when you can invest the time that you need to get yourself to that place where you want to sleep 6 to 8 hours a night, it benefits the other 16 to 18 hours that you're awake. But yeah, that's one of the realignments. That's one of my favorite case studies was a lady I worked with, and she's an emotional wellness coach. And she felt at times that if she was going to bed, she was missing out on the things that she liked to do when everyone else was asleep. Talk with her friends, develop these courses, all this stuff. She was getting like 3 hours a night for 8 years. And trying to get 3 hours a night and then maybe an hour and a half nap, but then again, missing out on the times of things. But she did like meditating. She did like that. And so instead of saying that she had to go to sleep at night, she would put in her planner, meditate.
Meditate.
Yeah. And so her meditation would take place in bed, and eventually she went to sleep. She started going to bed at 1 instead of 3, and then eventually 12, and then 11, and then 10. And, even the first time she went to bed at 1, she's like, well, I was aiming for 12, but I failed. I was like, no, if you're going to bed at 1, you've already improved your sleep in 2 weeks by like, what, 40%? She's like, oh, yeah, that's true. I was like, yeah, so just keep aiming for it. You'll get there. You got to aim for improvement, not perfection. And, 6 months later, she's telling me I'm going to bed like before 11 most nights a week now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I was just going to say on the fear of missing out thing, I noticed this is when I was a young parent, that it was very much like you felt so pressured and so much stress with like when the kids were doing stuff with the kids and getting ready for bed and all this stuff and things, and then like you wanted to have that time as a couple to interact, and if you did go to sleep like early, you really did feel like you were missing out on that and there's such a balance there between that. Like you'd want to maybe watch TV for a while or whatever, and then next thing you know it's 1 o'clock or whatever. And we compounded that with we were trying to like get in shape, and we would get up like at 4 in the morning or whatever to go walk. And I totally realized that prioritizing your fitness over your sleep is just, it's so bad. And so many people do it. It's like, putting the horse before the cart, that, you've got to get that sleep. That's got to be your priority. And then whatever you can add in around that, that's just bonus. But you can't, think, oh, it's going to be okay. I'll just make do on 3 hours of sleep or whatever. Like it comes back, and that's like I crashed my hormones by doing that because it's not sustainable, and that's the message I'm trying to get out to people.
That's a huge message. I could spend an hour talking about that, but I'll use a couple of short examples. You know who J.J. Watt is? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, the football player.
When I watched him years ago, this is one of the things that got me even more interested in sleep, because this guy is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's huge. He plays so hard, so physically. And I was watching, it was like on HBO, they have that whole, they'll follow a team for a season. And Hard Knocks. Right. And they were following the Texans when he was on the Texans. And one of the other younger players was like, how do you do that all the time? He's like, I sleep a lot. He said, I sleep like 12 hours. He goes, I lead a very boring lifestyle. But I was like, how is sleeping 12 hours going to help this dude? And so part of the research that I found,
LeBron James does that too. He's like
they've got the ability to do that at a highly technical level, but really at home you can do this type of thing. Do you need to sleep 12 hours a day? Well, if you want to be J.J. Watt and you have J.J. Watt abilities, absolutely. But the science behind it is the deep sleep, honestly, is where your best fat burn happens and your most muscle recovery happens. Because when you can get to deep sleep and you can get it in the right environment and temperatures, like it starts triggering a lot of stuff. Like you were saying, you were crashing your hormones because you were shortening your sleep. Well, you're shortening those periods where the deep sleep is going to happen. And so what ends up happening is you don't get the hormone releases, the growth hormones to do the repair and the cell building and the white blood cell building and the muscle repair and that, all the things you took in that you ate that day and all the things you did. All of it comes out to benefit when you can get like good solid sleep. Not just I slept for 8 hours. If you slept 8 hours tossing and turning because your environment wasn't good, then it's not going to help you. But if you slept a good 6 to 8 hours and you got into that good deep sleep with the right environment, that's when the magic happens to your body. So you're right. When you're like, oh, I got up at 4 and I got up at 5 and we'd walk, but you were shortening your sleep by 2 hours, 3 hours a night. That starts to add up, especially as you get older.
Yeah, absolutely does. Yeah. And then you also you're crashing during the day, and then you're resorting to coffee or eating to snacks to keep your energy up, and it just is a cycle. Of horribleness.
It is. And coffee is great if you have limited amounts before 10 hours that you plan to sleep. Coffee is good. Every morning I have French press coffee that I take, and that's part of my morning meditation is making it, because you can't just put it on drip and set it and forget it. You have to do things to make it happen. And I drink straight black coffee, but I don't need it to wake up at this point. I just enjoy it, and it's part of my meditation. But I stopped
Yeah,
by like 11.
I've struggled with that, man, because like I've drank coffee for a long time, and I just recently gave it up. I don't know if I'll go back or not. Like, I've been great without it. I never thought I could, go without it. But that it's just some things I've read or whatever, and I don't know. I decided to see how it works.
It's a good idea to do that.
But yeah,
and people will be like,
is.
"You don't need it." It's like, no, I don't. I don't use an alarm clock either. And some people are like, "I need an alarm clock. I don't need coffee." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't use an alarm clock most of the time now." But I didn't get here in a day, So.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, I don't want to keep too long. We've been here for 30 minutes, but I'd like to just wrap up and ask you. So I know you have some stuff for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I have. So I sent you a link to it. My website is called sleepyoudeserve.com. If you want to just go check that out. But I do have a direct link to a free guide that I made. I think it's like 9 pages long, and it's really just how to burn fat in your sleep. Like, what is the best thing?
That looks great. Yeah, I think my listeners will.
Yeah, I mean, what better way to lose the excess fat than to basically do nothing, right? But you have to set up the environment to where your body is just going to do the work, because that's when you burn the most fat anyways in your sleep. There are things you can do to optimize that. And at the end of that guide is a link if anybody wants to sign up and get on my newsletter. I send out newsletters maybe twice a week. I'm not going to stuff your mailbox with stuff every day just because I can. But every 2 weeks I send out a newsletter. I've got free stuff, more offers, more tips, upcoming classes if you want to hear more about that. And in the near future, for any veterans out there or folks that know veterans, I can speak a lot, as you've probably already heard, on why we suck at sleep. And there's going to be some products about that coming out very soon too.
That's exciting. That sounds great. I was going to just say, just when you're saying about sleep, burning fat in your sleep, and that does sound great. And that's one myth that I try to break people of, is they all think that it's all about exercise, and like you're gonna go and conquer, whatever, run your marathons and do this stuff, and like it's not where you lose weight. It's when you're sleeping, when you're actually restoring your body, and that's when all that. That's all the protein gets absorbed and, utilized and everything else. And it, when you don't get that sleep, that's when like you said, your metabolism crashes. You don't burn the fat, and, that's when you get into trouble. So yeah, I really appreciate that, man. That sounds like great resources, and I'm sure my listeners will.
Yeah, it's going to validate what you do when you're teaching about the proper foods and everything. Because most of your weight loss, not that losing weight in itself is necessarily the goal, but losing the stuff you don't need. Most of that, all the benefits of all the things that you ate, they happen in your sleep, and the exercise helps get that blood flow going, and tell the body, hey, we want to rebuild and get leaner, because it's going to help you as you get older. So
yeah, and like, I mean, you exercise, might exercise for an hour a day, but most of the calories that you burn are when you're not exercising.
Yep.
And, so it's about having a healthy body, and that's when you actually create that lean body that you want.
True.
Well, hey, great, Paul. I was so happy to have you today, and is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Just remember that you're not losing anything by improving your sleep. You're doing nothing but gaining a lot back in your life, and the opportunity to do more for the hours that you're awake. So just keep working at getting the sleep you deserve. It's a marathon. It's a builder, but just invest in yourself that way. It's one of the best things you can do. It's like passive income. You're building wealth in your body without even being awake, and who wouldn't want to do that?
Great. Thanks, Paul. And again, Paul Bright, his website is sleepyoudeserve.com. That's it. Okay. Thanks so much, Paul. You have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon.